Imagine standing on the Giza plateau 4,500 years ago, watching workers drag a stone block weighing as much as a city bus by hand up a ramp made of packed dirt and limestone chips. No cranes, no pulleys with mechanical advantage as we'd recognize them today, no wheels strong enough to carry that kind of weight. And yet, within 20 years, that effort and millions like it produced a structure so precise that its base is leveled to within a couple of centimeters across more than 13 acres. For over a century, this question has produced wild theories: ancient aliens, lost technology, secret machines nobody can explain. But the real answer turns out to be even more impressive than the myths, because it doesn't require anything magical. It requires something far rarer: a civilization organized well enough to move 6 million tons of stone using nothing but rope, wood, water, and an extraordinary amount of planning. Most people picture pyramid construction one of two ways. Either it was slave labor under the whip, thousands of miserable workers driven by force, or it's treated as an unsolved mystery, something modern engineers couldn't replicate, hinting at knowledge we've somehow lost. Neither picture survives contact with the archaeological evidence. Let's go find out what actually happened. To understand how this project worked at all, we first need to talk about the workers themselves, because everything else about this story depends on getting this part right. In 1990, archaeologists stumbled onto something that rewrote the entire narrative: a buried workers' cemetery near the pyramids at Giza. This wasn't a mass grave. These were individual, dignified burials located close enough to the pyramids themselves to suggest genuine status, not disposable labor. Further excavation revealed something even more telling: an entire town. Long barracks, wide paved streets, bakeries, breweries, a purpose-built settlement that one archaeologist described as feeling almost like an ancient hotel complex compared to typical village life of the era. The scale of how these workers were fed reveals just how seriously this operation was run. Archaeologists studying the site estimate that more than 4,000 pounds of meat, roughly 11 cattle, and dozens of sheep and goats were butchered every single day to feed the workforce. Each laborer needed real protein, real nutrition, delivered consistently, because you cannot extract this level of physical output from a starving, mistreated population for 20 straight years. As one researcher who studies the site put it, the workers were taken care of, and that mattered enough that it created its own kind of incentive to be there. The modern estimate puts the core workforce at around 10,000 people at any given time, organized into teams with names, rotations, and apparently even mild rivalries based on graffiti workers left on the blocks themselves, bragging about which crew worked harder. This wasn't an anonymous mass of forced labor. It was something closer to a national project, drawing skilled workers from across Egypt who rotated through a system that resembled paid labor or a structured tax obligation, far more than the chains and whips depicted in old Hollywood films. But feeding 10,000 organized workers for 20 years still leaves the central engineering question completely unanswered. How do you actually move a 6-ton block, let alone an 80-ton one, without a single piece of modern machinery? To answer that, we need to talk about the part of this story almost nobody considers. The journey didn't start at the pyramid. It started hundreds of miles away, on the other side of Egypt. The smaller limestone blocks that make up most of the pyramid's body came from quarries close to Giza itself. But the massive granite beams used deep inside the structure, some weighing between 50 and 80 tons, were quarried at Aswan, more than 500 miles to the south. Moving stones that heavy across open desert for hundreds of miles would have been a logistical nightmare bordering on impossible. So the Egyptians simply didn't do it that way. They used the river.
In 2024, researchers confirmed something many archaeologists had long suspected. A major branch of the Nile once ran directly alongside the Giza Plateau, close enough that boats could deliver stone almost to the construction site itself. This wasn't a guess based on convenience. It was confirmed years earlier by an extraordinary discovery: Logbooks belonging to an official named Merer, found in 2013 in a cave at Wadi al-Jarf, describing in his own handwriting the day-to-day transport of limestone blocks by boat from quarries to Giza. We don't have to imagine how they moved the stone. We have the shipping records. So the stone arrives by water, right at the base of the construction site. But getting it up to the higher levels of a structure approaching 500 feet tall is an entirely different problem, and this is where the real engineering debate begins. For over a century, the leading theory has simply been ramps, long, inclined paths built from packed rubble and earth that workers use to drag stones upward, using ropes, wooden sleds, and teams of laborers pulling in coordinated rhythm. Direct physical evidence supports this. At a separate site called Hatnub, archaeologists discovered the actual remains of an ancient ramp system, a central ramp flanked by two staircases lined with post holes, evidence that workers used wooden posts and ropes to haul blocks up extremely steep slopes using mechanical leverage we can still reconstruct today. But a simple straight external ramp running all the way up the Great Pyramid creates a problem so significant it actually casts doubt on the simplest version of this theory. The amount of material such a ramp would require is staggering, arguably more material than the pyramid itself. And yet, no archaeological trace of a ramp anywhere near that scale has ever been found at Giza. This is the part of the story where most assumptions about a single simple ramp completely fall apart. If a giant external ramp existed at the scale required, it should have left enormous physical evidence behind. It hasn't, so either the evidence is missing or the ramp wasn't built the way people have always assumed. To resolve this contradiction, researchers turned to a tool that didn't exist for most of the 20th century: physics from outer space. The Scan Pyramids project, using cosmic ray particles called muons that pass through solid stone, scanned the interior of the Great Pyramid without drilling a single hole. What they found surprised everyone: hidden voids, including one large enough to rival the pyramid's main interior gallery, and an entirely unknown corridor near the structure's north face. Nobody fully understands the purpose of these spaces yet, but most researchers agree they weren't built for ritual reasons. They were very likely functional, structural, possibly even related to the construction process itself. This discovery reopened an old idea, proposed decades earlier by French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, that the missing material wasn't used for one giant external ramp at all, but for a spiral ramp built directly into the pyramid's own structure, winding upward internally as the building rose, with workers hauling stone through corridors that became part of the finished monument rather than scaffolding to be torn down afterward. And the most recent research takes this even further. In 2026, a new computational study modeled something called an integrated edge ramp system. Multiple ramps built directly into the pyramid's edges, eventually narrowing to a single path as the structure tapered toward its peak. Run through detailed simulation, the math actually works. The model accounts for two-way traffic, loaded sleds going up and empty ones coming back down, even factoring in the time loss navigating 90-degree turns at each corner. The resulting construction timeline lines up almost exactly with the 20 to 27-year historical accounts already describe. For the very first time, a single mathematical model successfully explains the workforce size, the construction timeline, the missing ramp material, and the mysterious internal voids discovered by cosmic ray imaging, all at once. So how were the pyramids actually built? Not by aliens, not by lost technology nobody can explain. They were built by tens of thousands of well-fed, organized, skilled Egyptian workers using the Nile as a highway, ramps built directly into the monument itself rather than discarded afterward, simple rope and lever mechanics that modern engineers can still replicate today, and roughly 2 decades of relentless, coordinated effort on a scale almost nothing in the ancient world ever attempted again. The real story isn't that we lack an explanation,
It's that the explanation was always sitting right there in the stone, the documents, and the bones of the people who built it, waiting for the right combination of archaeology and physics to finally read it correctly. If stories like this make you think differently about what ancient civilizations were actually capable of, stick around because there's a lot more buried in the historical record we haven't covered yet. And let me know in the comments, now that you've seen how the math actually adds up, does the mystery feel solved to you, or do you think there's still something we're missing?